A sitting president destroyed evidence, paid hush money, and used the CIA and FBI to obstruct justice. And when it all collapsed, he walked out of the White House, boarded a helicopter, and waved goodbye. No prison, no trial, no full accounting. Just a pardon, in a story the country decided it already understood. But here's the thing. Pause for a second. The version of Watergate most people know is the version that was allowed to become the official story, and that version is missing something. Not a conspiracy, a pattern, and once you see it, the break-in becomes the least interesting part of the whole thing. June 17th, 1972, Washington, D.C., a security guard named Frank Wills is doing his rounds at the Watergate complex when he notices a piece of tape on a door latch. He removes it, comes back later, the tape is back, he calls the police, they find 5 men inside the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, the DNC, dressed in surgical gloves and carrying cameras, electronic surveillance equipment, and thousands of dollars in cash, including consecutive serial numbered $100 bills that could be traced. They are arrested. And at first the White House calls it a third-rate burglary, nothing more. But here's what the official story glosses over. Pause for a second. These were not random criminals. One of the 5 men, James McCord, was the security director of Nixon's own re-election committee, the committee to re-elect the president, known almost too perfectly as CREEP. Another, E. Howard Hunt, was a former CIA officer. A third, G. Gordon Liddy, was a former FBI agent who was also working for Nixon's campaign. The team had previously broken into the office of a psychiatrist to steal files on Daniel Ellsberg, the man who leaked the Pentagon Papers. These were not burglars, these were operatives, with records, with clearances, with direct lines to the people running the country. So why would a sitting president's team risk everything for something this small? That question has never had a satisfying answer. The official explanation is that Nixon wanted to find out what the Democrats knew about a potential scandal involving campaign contributions, but intelligence operatives with CIA and FBI backgrounds do not break into offices over opposition research. People with those backgrounds break into offices when what they are looking for is worth the risk. What they were looking for has never been fully established, and this is where it stops making sense. Because within days of the arrest, the White House was not just distancing itself, it was actively dismantling the investigation. Nixon's counsel, John Dean, later testified that a cancer was growing on the presidency and that the cover-up had begun almost immediately. The CIA was instructed to tell the FBI to back off the investigation on national security grounds. Personal lawyers were paid, witnesses were coached, and the 5 arrested men received nearly $500,000 in hush money, funneled through a complex network of intermediaries to stay quiet and plead guilty. The cover-up was not improvised. It was coordinated, organized, resourced, which raises a much bigger question, and here's the part most people miss. The original break-in, if it had been handled quietly, would likely have never become a constitutional crisis. Nixon was winning the 1972 election by a landslide. He did not need whatever the burglars were looking for. He did not need to risk anything, and yet the moment 5 men were arrested inside the DNC, the most powerful office in the world, mobilized a systematic, multi-agency obstruction of justice that ultimately consumed his entire presidency. What was so important that it needed to be hidden at all costs? Because the cover-up tells you more than the crime. When someone destroys evidence, you learn something about what the evidence contained. When someone pays $500,000 in hush money, you learn something about what the people being paid could say. And when a president uses the CIA, the FBI, and the full legal resources of the executive branch to shut down an investigation into a break-in at the opposition party's headquarters, you learn something about what that investigation might have found. Now fast forward to what happens next. By 1973, the investigation had expanded beyond the break-in entirely. Senate hearings revealed a system inside the Nixon White House that went far. Beyond Watergate, there were enemies lists targeting journalists, political opponents, and private citizens for IRS audits and FBI surveillance. There were slush funds, there were domestic spying operations, the machinery of the US government being used against its own people for political purposes. And then came the tapes. Nixon had installed a secret recording system in the Oval Office. When investigators discovered it, they demanded the recordings. Nixon refused. He fired the special prosecutor who demanded them in an event that became known as the Saturday Night Massacre, an act so politically catastrophic that it accelerated the end of his presidency faster than the break-in itself ever could have. He fought harder to protect those tapes than he fought for anything else. And when 18.5 minutes of a critical recording were found to have been erased, Nixon's secretary claimed she had accidentally deleted them by holding a foot pedal while reaching for a phone. Forensic analysis later showed the erasure required multiple deliberate actions over an extended period. The gap has never been explained. What was on those 18.5 minutes has never been recovered, and this is the part that changes everything. Nixon resigned on August 9, 1974, the only U.S. president ever to do so. His successor, Gerald Ford, pardoned him 1 month later, before any charges were formally filed, ensuring that Nixon would never testify under oath in a criminal proceeding about what he actually knew, what he actually ordered, and what the investigation was actually getting close to. Was Watergate the crime, or just the moment they got caught? Because here's what the full record suggests. The break-in was not the beginning of something, it was a symptom of something that already existed. A White House that had been operating a parallel structure of surveillance, political sabotage, and information control for years, before 5 men were caught with tape on a door latch. The investigation that followed never fully answered what that structure was protecting. It was shut down by a pardon before it could. And this is where the story stops being about Nixon and starts being about something larger. Watergate is remembered as a political scandal. A president got caught, he resigned, the system worked. That is the official conclusion, and it is not wrong. But what the official conclusion skips is this. The only reason any of it came out was because a security guard noticed a piece of tape, because a judge refused to let the case die quietly, because 2 reporters at the Washington Post kept pulling threads that everyone else had dropped, because a source inside the FBI, a man known only as Deep Throat for 30 years, was willing to guide them toward what they were looking for. Remove any one of those variables and the story does not exist. Nixon finishes his second term. The enemy's lists stay classified, the slush funds stay hidden, the surveillance operations continue, and the 18.5 minutes of erased tape remain the only record of whatever was said in that room. The truth came out because something went wrong in the machinery designed to keep it hidden, because at that point the scandal isn't the story anymore, because at that point it stops looking like a mistake and starts looking like a system, which means the real question is not what Nixon did. It is this. If the truth only came out because a security guard noticed a piece of tape on a door, how many stories exactly like this one never had their piece of tape? Tell me in the comments what you think Watergate was really protecting, if anything, because that question does not have an official answer, and it never will.